Breaking overnight, the ambush-style shooting of National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. has taken another tragic turn. One of those Guard members has died, the other still fighting for his life. President Trump announcing that 20-year-old Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom died from her injuries on Thanksgiving. He called her an incredible person who was outstanding in every way. New images from overnight of law enforcement officers lining the streets for the transfer of her body. Beckstrom's former boyfriend spoke to CNN and said she had a huge heart and would do anything for anyone. The other wounded Guard member, a 24-year-old Andrew Wolf, remains hospitalized and is in critical condition. We're also learning more about the suspect in custody, a 29-year-old Afghan national. He arrived in the United States in 2021 on a resettlement program after working with the CIA in Afghanistan, helping American troops. President Trump, in the wake of the shooting, says the U.S. will, quote, permanently pause migration from all third world countries. He also says the U.S. will re-examine all green cards issued to people from what the administration calls 19 countries of concern. CNN's Betsy Klein joining us now live from Washington this morning. What is the latest on this investigation?
Well, Sarah, an interagency investigation is now underway to determine exactly how this horrific tragedy could have happened, while the Trump administration, meanwhile, is ramping up its aggressive immigration policies. We know that this suspect is an Afghan national who came to the United States in 2021. He applied for asylum in 2024, and it was granted under the Trump administration in April of this year. Now, we've also learned that this suspect worked with U.S. forces, including the CIA, starting in 2011. A U.S. official tells CNN that he was vetted by intelligence agencies and clean on all checks. The question now of his pathway to violence is going to be a major target for investigators. Now, officials say it's still too soon to say what the motive is, but President Trump, as he addressed troops on Thanksgiving, offering his own speculation. Listen.
He went cuckoo. I mean, he went nuts. And that happens, too. It happens too often with these people. You see them. But look, this is how they come in. This is how they're standing on top of each other. And that's an airplane. There was no vetting or anything. They came in unvetted. And we have a lot of others in this country. We're going to get them out. But they go cuckoo. Something happens to them.
Now, within hours of this shooting, the president moved to justify an even more intense immigration crackdown. The director of United States Citizenship and Immigration Services announced that at the president's direction, he was ordering the re-examination of all green cards issued to people from countries of concern. That includes about 19 countries, including Afghanistan, Iran, Venezuela, among many others. The president last night also calling for what he described as reverse migration. In a lengthy post to social media, he wrote, quote, "I will permanently pause migration from all third world countries and remove anyone who is not a net asset to the United States." We have, of course, asked the White House and State Department for clarity on what countries that would impact. Attorney General Pamela Bondi, meanwhile, says that the Justice Department will do everything in their power to seek the death penalty for this suspect.
All right, Betsy Klein, thank you so much for your reporting for us. And over to you, Brad.
Thank you, Sarah. Joining me now is CNN senior national security analyst Juliette Kayyem. Juliette, great to have you here with us. You know, first, as we think about the investigation, the radius is extremely wide, including the path of travel to commit the deadly act. What do we know about progress thus far and the resources that need to be mobilized for this type of scale?
Well, it's going to have sort of two nexus points. One is going to be in Washington State, sort of his ties, who he was living with, where he was living, family, contacts. Was there a network that was supporting him? Then, of course, in D.C., how long was he there? Why did he choose this group of National Guard members? And then, of course, there's the linkage between the two. Where did he stop? Who may he have been in contact with? Was he calling anyone abroad? So it's going to be extensive in that sense. What's the good news in this tragedy is it's a knowable suspect who's had ties to the United States essentially for most of his life, between his work with the CIA or with the United States in Afghanistan through at least 3 vetting processes to get his amnesty status, asylum status, and then, of course, whatever ties he had with family and friends where he was living.
And so, as information piles up, what does a typical breakthrough moment look like in the effort to establish a motive?
Well, so it's interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot because he's a suspect who we don't normally have suspects who have such ties with the United States. I mean, in other words, when we have a terror or a violent incident like this, it's someone either here who has no contact with the U.S. or with U.S. authorities, or someone who comes in from abroad. This is someone who was vetted at least by the CIA or the National Counterterrorism Center, was vetted when he came over, when Kabul fell in Afghanistan, and then once again when he's granted amnesty. Look, there's a lot of politics behind this. I think we just need to step outside of that and say either the vetting process was bad, missed something key, or the radicalization process was fast, that between the time he received amnesty a couple months ago and now something happened. So investigators are going to look at some trauma in his life, something that happened in Afghanistan that he blamed the United States for.
Juliette Kayyem, thank you so much for taking the time, breaking this down this morning.
So in terms of where things stand this morning, there are some questions about specifically all these countries, right, that the president has referred to, which he calls, quote, third world countries. When we look at the reexamination process, there is also, Eugene, there is a concern about focusing too much on the country and what the ripple effect could be for those who are here in the country who are not a threat. How do you see this playing out?
Well, that will be a real issue that we've already seen risen by Afghan communities and the associations that welcome and help resettle refugees. There's a real concern about keeping Americans and immigrants safe, how the Trump administration goes about doing that without harming and discriminating against those who have come here to actually be, as he would label it, an asset to the U.S. isn't yet clear. There's some concern that he may not be able to do that in a way that is fair, but he hasn't detailed his immigration plan yet in terms of how he's going to keep Americans safe, and I assume that there will be pressure on him to clarify that.
Malik, the president, and these are the president's words here, said the suspect went cuckoo. There are questions about what may have happened in the wake of that asylum being granted earlier this year. How do you anticipate looking into what changed perhaps for the suspect, what may have changed for the suspect, is going to impact this investigation into thousands, tens of thousands of others?
Well, it seems to be very clear that there was obviously a relationship that the United States had with this particular guy. And the only thing that we could think of really at this point is to say that at some point he became radicalized. So why did he become radicalized? We really don't know the answer to that question. But the fact that he particularly targeted National Guard troops here in Washington, D.C., and I believe, if I may be getting it wrong here, but I don't think that he's a resident of even the DMV area. So what was it about the National Guard? The only thing that I could see is that because of the conversation that many people have been having about the National Guard here, not just in Washington, D.C., but elsewhere around the country, I think that's the only thing that I could think of that factored into why he would come to Washington, D.C. and shoot to National Guard troops. It's the conversation that we've been having about National Guards in the areas, much like here in Washington.
Right, and again, we don't know yet, of course. It's important to stress we do not know what the motive is behind this. So much still needs to come out in that investigation. Daniela, the president very quickly, in the wake of this, saying he wanted to add an additional 500 National Guard troops to the district. Of course, this is all coming amid, right? And then shortly after that, we had the emergency motion that was filed because a judge had ruled last week that the initial deployment of those troops back in August was actually illegal. As all of this comes into play, there have been security concerns raised about these National Guard members by a number of folks, former intelligence officials and former military who I spoke with, certainly in the wake of this on Wednesday night, said they were concerned that those 500 additional troops could become targets. How much is the administration addressing those concerns?
The administration, from the very beginning, Erica, has defended its decision to have these National Guard troops in the DMV area. And the whole point of it, if you remember, let's go back to what happened in August when President Donald Trump said that it was time to clean up D.C. And that was the effort that he made to call these troops to Washington and, of course, try to keep them here as long as possible. We are going to see an extension of that now that he's called for 500 more troops to come to Washington, D.C. It's going to be potentially an escalation of what we've already seen, seeing these troops, a militarized D.C., as it's been the past couple of now months since they've arrived to D.C. But look, it's important to make clear that Trump, of course, defending his decision to have them here, and of course, believing that this could be a solution to have additional troops, that image of the National Guard, militarized D.C. to prevent further violence, but it also could initiate more violence. It's unclear what could happen going forward, Erica.